switching focus to another important aspect of web development, which is web API using JavaScript. Critical part. But first, let me show you the big picture, how we're traveling in this course. So far, we have been looking at the front-end development. Just to remind you, in web development, we have two sides of development. We have the front end, this is the client side, and we have the back end on the server side. So far, this is what we have been focusing on: HTTP, HTML, CSS, and pure JavaScript programming. Now we will start seeing how we can use JavaScript for web development, but this time we will spend a bit of time on the back end and see how we can develop web API. So web API, in a simple way to define it, you have been creating some functionality so far in your lab, hopefully in some training that you have been doing. And you have created some, let's say, useful stuff, useful functionality that you want other people to access through the web. So you wrote something. If you want others to use it, you have to give them the code, or they have to come to your machine and use it. But what if you want to open it to the rest of the world through the internet? If you want to open certain functionality and make it accessible, you need to create web API. So web API is the glue that will connect the client with the server side. So your code is here, all your logic, reading and writing to database, doing some computations. You know how to do this so far in JavaScript. What we will learn is how to make that functionality, how to make that code that you have written, how to make its functionality accessible to the rest of the world through the internet. So to do that, we have to first have some simple understanding of how the web really works. The basic architecture of the internet, it's basically a client-server architecture. You have the client, which is the web browser, and you have the server. So your web API will be here. So basically, your web API that we will build will be here. So the way it works, because it is a client-server architecture, what does the client do? They send a request. The server will receive the request, will make sense of it, will do some computation, and it will generate some results. And then it will send a response to the client. So it's a very, very simple model of request response. And this model, because you have the client using the browser, and the server could be anything. Could be a Node.js server, could be Java, could be C++. They need a protocol of communication for this to take place. For this communication to happen, you need to have a protocol of communication. I will explain what a protocol later on, but for now, just very quickly, the protocol that we use on the web is called the HTTP protocol. This is the most important protocol us as developers, we really need to understand. So HTTP is very simple protocol, super simple. So the way it works, let me demonstrate it the way it works in a very simple way. So in here, let's say I request this web page, the QU website web page. So what I'll do, I'll just watch in the background what's going on when I do a request. So I refresh this page. So what the browser did, it's basically created an HTTP request. Here is the browser. And here is QU server. All I did here, I requested this logo. Okay, so every resource or everything on the internet has an address. Every web page, every image, every video, every resource on the web, it has a particular address. So for you to get to a resource, you need to know the address. Luckily, these days we have Google, we can search, it gives us all the addresses, we click, we get there. The HTTP protocol is so simple protocol. What you do is you send a request. The browser will send a request to the server. The request, the way it is formulated is plain text. It's a very simple text message the browser will send to the server. The text message will have a verb, in our case, get, followed by a path, which a particular resource you want to get, followed by a particular path of the resource, and then the host. Which host are you sending this to? In our case, it was sent to www.qu.edu.qa. You cannot say here, give me, or send me, or I want. You have to use this verb. That's why we call it a protocol. It's a standard, well-defined, agreed-upon way the client and the server will communicate on these rules of communication. So for the communication to happen, they must, between machine to machine or between software to software, we have to follow a protocol for this to happen. On the web, these protocols happens to be HTTP. Here is how it works. So here is the request. I made a request to this file. If you can see here carefully. Here is the request. It is a GET request, and here is the resource I asked for, and it went to this server. Okay? Now, here is the response coming back from the server. The response says, by the way, I'm sending you plain text. Everything went okay. You get 200 okay. Basically, the idea of HTTP and how it works. It's a client-server. It's a client-server protocol. The client will make a GET request to a particular URL, and the server will respond. With the response, not only you get the content, you also get some status code. In our case, if everything went okay, what do we get? A status code of 200 okay. Okay? So you will get more familiar with this. For now, all I want you to understand is that us as web developers, we need to really understand HTTP. So here is the message that the client will send to the server, and here is the response the server will provide. If everything goes okay, the server will send a status code 200 okay. It will send other stuff plus the actual content that the user have requested. That's the basic idea of HTTP. So now if I send something to the server, it will not use get, it will use another verb, post. So if I fill up a form and submit the form, so the form will be, the data that I entered in the form will be sent to the server using a post request. And I will show you this, inshallah, next time. Guys. The browser will make an HTTP request using a well-defined HTTP protocol. The server will also use HTTP protocol to respond. So we have the concept of a client and a server, and we have the concept of a request and a response. Okay, that's all I want you to understand for now. Inshallah, next time I will explain this in much more depth. Now I just want to give you this small introduction and then jump to the actual coding, how we do this. For me to be able to provide some content from the server to the client, I need to create a web server. So to create a web server in Node.js, one simple way of doing it is you use one of the packages that you can download from NPM, very, very famous package. It is called Express. So just to show you here, if I do here npm express, it is the package of choice widely used for building a web application using Node.js. And you can see here just for the last 7 days how many downloads. So this is what you do. You import the Express library. You create a new instance of Express, and then you start listening to verbs coming from the web. So people will either come to you using a GET request, or they can come using a POST request. So let's say somebody came and they asked, using a GET verb, they asked for this URL. Like, for example, let's say hello. So they came to my server, to the address of my server / this URL hello. So what I'll do here, if somebody comes to this URL, I run this function here. So it is a request response, and I will do here response.send. Okay, and then I'll say here app. For us to build a web application on the server side, I will use the Express library. Then basically I create an instance of the Express, and then I start listening to requests coming from the web. So these requests will use a verb, because in the web you have to use one of the verbs, get, post, put. We will see this verb later on in more details. You use one particular verb and you use a particular address. So if somebody comes to this address, this is what we will send them. Now, once I create a web application, I need to get it to start listening at some port. So the way it works is that on the server side, I will have a program. So I write a program that will do some useful functionality, and I make it listen to certain ports on the network. So if somebody connects to my machine at that particular port, then this application will respond. So let me run it, and then I will try to explain it a little bit more. So I run this, and I'll go to this URL. If I go to the root of the web server, so my web server is localhost and the port is 5000. Because I did not put anything on the root, which is the /, there is nothing. But if I go to /hello, I will get the server will respond. Explained on the web, we have the concept of a request and concept of a response. In the request, I will get anything that the user has sent me through the request. And the response object, I will basically use it to send the response back to the requester. Now, this request and response object, they are automatically created by Express. So Express has all this smartness. It can help me to listen to a particular port. It listens to a port. When a request comes, it will call my function. When a request comes to this port, it will say, this request is coming to which URL? It says, oh, this URL, hello. Then I will run this function corresponding to this URL. So it is very, very basic and very simple programming model. I'll show you a bit more realistic example. Okay. So suppose I want to serve files that are available on disk already. I have some files on disk, such as, you see here, I have a folder called public. Under this folder, I have a couple of images. So there is a cat here. There is some text file here. There is an HTML page here. So let's say these are static files. There's no programming involved here. So if I want to serve these files, it asks you for static files, files that are not generated using a program. Please look them up under this folder called public. So you just need to add this line. And then once you add this line, people can access any of this stuff that is in this URL, in this folder public. Okay. So this simple line allows this Express application to return static resources that are available in the public subfolder. So without any programming, in one line you can serve or you can respond with static files. Under the public, I have this cats.jpg. Okay, So all I do, I go there and say /cats/jpj. So what will happen is, because this is a static resource. So the Express web application will look in the public folder, and it will look for a file named cat.jpj, and it will serve this file. It will return this file. The web is made up of what we call as a resource. The web is equal a set of resources. That's what the web is. These resources have two types: static and dynamic. What do I mean by static? All the time, whenever you request that resource, it is the same. Like these cats, this is a static resource. This is a static. I ask for it 10,000 times, it is the same. But for example, if I go to Al Jazeera, the content coming from Al Jazeera is dynamic. Every time I visit, yes, every time I visit, it will generate the content from some database using some filters, some computation. But this one is a static. Static means the content will not change unless somebody manually goes and changes it. Dynamic is something that continuously changes because it is generated by some kind of program. This program could look up data from the database, it could do some computation and return the results, and so on. Okay?
But how, another
yes,
question,
yes, please.
How I know I'm requesting a static?
Okay, very good. In static, you must know the address and the URL. You must know it. If you don't know it, usually the owner or the developer will make those static pages accessible through URLs. You see here what I'm doing? I created here a text message, Assalamu alaikum, and then I keep appending to this message. I appended how many links? Heroes, quotes, and cats. So you can see here, when I visit, I get this page, and I get a links, like cats. Have a look. When I click, I get this. This is a static page. Now, heroes, have a look at these heroes. This is a dynamic resource. It's not static. If I go to public, have a look. In public, there isn't these heroes here. So how these heroes were generated? You see here, if somebody came to my application using get/heroes, can you see here? Mm-hmm. The verb is get, and the heroes is /get. What we will do in this case?
Get.
So what we will do is I will go to a repository. Remember, this is just a way of organizing my code. I could put all the code in here, which is not very good at all. What I'm doing, I am taking the code that will generate this list of heroes, and I'm putting it in a separate function in another file. So if I take this and jump there, you can see heroes here is using asynchronous programming to read from the file. So this is how I read from the file. I do fs.read. And because this is asynchronous, I put in front of it a wait. When the results come back, I parse it I parse it to JSON and return it. Okay. Now, on the application, all I'm doing, I'll take the results and I send it back to the requester. So I'll do request.json instead of request.send. I'll do request.json and then send put the variable name. It's very, very powerful. So all I'm doing here, I want to some function in my class, in another class, run the function, get the results, and I send it back to the server side. Sorry, I send it back to the requester. Yes? So all the concept of the web can be summarized in this very, very simple method. So the web is all about request and response. When you make a request as the client, what are two things you need to specify in your request? Two important things. The verb, which verb you are using. If you are requesting something, what verb we should be using? Get, followed by the path, a URL that you are asking for. Okay, so these are the two things that comes with the request. Then when the request comes, the server will say, oh, you are coming using get, and you are asking for this path heroes. So this lucky function will be the one that will handle your requests. How this function will handle your request? It will make a call to this repository function. It will get the result. It knows that the result is a JSON format, and then it will return it to you as JSON. Is this clear? Okay. Yes, please.
So anything other than these is static? Can I define?
Yes, this one is static. For example, in here, I'm returning a file. Although this is dynamic code, but the actual content is static. Okay, so the browser created a GET request. Okay, it created a GET request. It sent it to this URL, and then on the server side, it says, okay, I got a GET request. Here's the server side. It said I got a GET request for this URL/code. How should I respond to this? I will read the file from the, when you see this __ dir name, this is the current folder. So I'm taking the current folder, under the current folder, and the public, I'll find a file called code.txt, and I will send this file back to the requester. So the content of this code is this. So when I request this resource, this is what I'm getting. But the web is not always like just getting resources. Sometimes we fill up a form. I might fill up a form and then enter all the information I need to fill, and then I'll send it back to the server. So in this case, let's see if we can fill up some form. When the requester requests some resource from the server, it has to use one of the verbs. So typically we use get to retrieve or to read some resources from this, to request some resources from the server. We use post to send some data to create a new resource. So for example, I can sign up and create a new account. I fill up the form and submit it to the server side using post request. Now, if there is some resource already exists, for example, you already have an account, you just want to change your phone number or you change your address. So in this case, you will bring the form, do any changes, and submit it back. And this time, typically, you will use a put request. If you no longer need the account and you want to delete it, you will send a delete request. So these are the main HTTP verbs that are used in practice. Get to request, post for adding, put for updating, and delete for removing. Okay, so let me show you this in a very concrete way. So here is let me show you in terms of repository. So in this repository, have a look. I have a couple of methods. By the way, look at this repository. There is nothing to do with the web. It's just plain JavaScript. Okay, so I can get all the heroes in this file. I can get a particular hero. I can also add. I can add a new one. I can update. Okay, and I can delete. So this is a very common add, update, delete, and get. So here, this is nothing to do with the web. It's just functions that are able to achieve these goals. Now, what is my goal? I want to make these functions available through the web. So what should I do to be able to do this, to make them accessible through the web? I have to create a web API. So web API is nothing but what I just explained. So let me show you how I am doing this. Okay. Just a second. Okay. So here it is. Have a look. So, or maybe, let me just not to confuse you too much because of the time. Let me just show you another example here. Have a look. Now, In here, if somebody comes to /heroes, what they will get? They will get all the heroes that we have in that file. Now, if I want just one of them, not all of them, I just want one of them. So what I will do, I will say here get, and then kind of at the end of the URL, you give me the ID of which hero you want me to retrieve. So in this case, what I will do here, I will say here hero ID. How do I read this parameter when the request comes in? I can easily read this parameter from request.params.id. So have a look. So here, this is my URL. The first part is the address. The second part is a parameter passed in the URL. So for example, here I want to return the hero number 1. When this request arrives, let's say you send me here 1. How do I retrieve this part of the URL? I will go and say request.params.id, the name that I put in the URL. And then in here, instead of getting all the heroes, I'll just get one of them. Yeah, and you can see the results coming back. Yes, so you can pass parameters in the URL using slash. The last slash is basically after it, I am passing a parameter, and I am passing this parameter to the method call and getting one particular hero. The same. It is exactly the same, except yes, instead of using the get, you will use post. Okay. Now you will ask me, how do I get what the user has sent me? So this is where, no, not params. Params is what's come from the URL. So you need another piece of middleware. You need basically you need to install a package called body parser. Okay. And you will say, once you create this guy, you will say app.use. So this is an extra library that will intercept the request. It will get the request, extract what the user has sent in with the request, in the body of the request, and then the actual hero that you will get, it will be stored in let hero equal request.body. So whatever the user has sent you will be in request.body, and then you take this hero and you add it here. Okay? That's it. That's all you need to do. Now, if you want to test it, of course, you can create a web interface for the user to enter the data, or you can just use a tool called Postman. The body is JSON document. I'm creating a new hero, okay? And basically, I put it in the body of the request, and I will say content is app.js, yes. Okay, so this is the address, this is the body, and then I'll do send. Hopefully, if everything goes okay, I should be having a new hero added.
There's /heroes get and /heroes post.
Yes, get is for reading, post is for adding.
It's just
different verb. Same protocol, HTTP protocol, different verbs. If I want to read, which verb I use? Get. If I want to create a new resource, post. If I want to update, put, and so on.